Most people assume influence works on the weak, the naive, or the uninformed. They believe that intelligence, education, or self-awareness offers protection. It doesn't. In fact, the more complex the world becomes, the more even intelligent people rely on automatic decisions. Not because they're careless, but because they're efficient. The mind learns when to stop thinking, not because it's lazy, but because it has to. And that's where influence begins. Influence is often misunderstood as manipulation and compliance as weakness. But that framing is inaccurate. Human behavior isn't shaped primarily by intelligence or morality. It's shaped by design. The brain evolved to survive in environments where speed mattered more than precision. Every day, you face thousands of decisions. Analyzing each one deeply would be impossible. So the mind develops shortcuts, patterns of response that usually work well enough. Most of the time, these shortcuts are useful. They conserve energy, reduce hesitation, and allow society to function smoothly. The problem isn't that people think too little. It's that they must. At the center of human behavior is a simple reality. The brain is not designed to seek truth at all costs. It is designed to make decisions fast enough to function in a complex world. To do this, it relies on what psychologists call automatic responses, learned rules that reduce effort. When a situation feels familiar, the mind doesn't analyze. It recognizes a pattern and reacts. These patterns are built from experience, culture, and social norms. They work well most of the time, which is why we trust them. We don't question them because questioning everything would paralyze us. This is not a flaw, it's an adaptation. But automatic thinking has a vulnerability. When a single cue stands out, a gesture, a word, a signal that usually means safe, important, or valuable, the mind can respond without evaluating the full context. One trigger becomes enough to guide the decision. Influence works not by overpowering reason, but by bypassing it, by activating shortcuts the mind has already agreed to use. It's tempting to believe that intelligence offers immunity, that awareness creates distance from influence. But intelligence often does the opposite. Intelligent people rely more heavily on systems, signals, and abstractions because they understand how complex the world is. Rather than analyzing everything from scratch, they trust markers of reliability, credentials, confidence, consensus, familiarity. These shortcuts are efficient and usually correct. Over time, they become automatic. The danger isn't ignorance. The danger is overconfidence in one's own discernment. When someone believes they're too smart to be influenced, they stop checking. They assume their judgment is active when it's often delegated. In practice, intelligence speeds up acceptance instead of slowing it down. This is why highly educated people fall for the same pressures as everyone else. They don't feel controlled. They feel certain. Highly intelligent people don't fall for influence because they're careless. They fall for it because they're confident. When someone becomes very educated, a lawyer, a doctor, an expert, they learn systems, rules, and frameworks that usually work. Over time, those systems become trusted shortcuts. Instead of questioning every situation, they rely on what has worked before. That confidence feels like control, but often it's delegation. Their thinking isn't always active, it's running on trained patterns. The more knowledge they accumulate, the easier it becomes to stop re-evaluating. Not because they're lazy, but because constantly questioning would slow them down. So influence doesn't need to overpower them. It just needs to align with what they already believe. That's why they don't feel manipulated. They feel certain, and certainty quietly turns thinking off. This isn't speculation. It comes from decades of research in social psychology, most notably from Influence, written by Robert Cialdini, a professor who spent years studying how people actually make decisions in real-world conditions. Cialdini didn't study influence in theory. He observed it in sales, religion, politics, business, and everyday social interactions. What he found was consistent. People don't comply because they're persuaded step by step. They comply because a familiar signal tells the brain, this situation doesn't require analysis. That's why influence shows up everywhere, in authority figures, social pressure, obligations, and urgency. These cues don't force decisions, they replace them. And because they usually work, people rarely notice when they don't. The result is a society that runs smoothly, and a system that can be quietly exploited. The uncomfortable truth is not that influence exists, it's that it must. A world without shortcuts would be unlivable. Trust, efficiency, and cooperation depend on them. The same mechanisms that allow society to function are the ones that leave individuals exposed. The goal, then, is not to eliminate automatic thinking. That's impossible. The goal is to recognize when it's likely to appear and why it feels so convincing when it does. Because the most effective influence doesn't announce itself. It feels natural. It feels reasonable. It feels like your own decision. And that's what makes it powerful. Influence doesn't work by taking control away from you. It works by convincing the mind that control is unnecessary. And once you understand that, you begin to see why the most powerful influences are the ones you never feel happening.